And good morning, everybody, and welcome to the Morning Exiles podcast. Yeah, that's right. We're here. Why aren't you? We're at La Divina Italian Cafe. Glad to have you with us on this Tuesday morning. Weather has finally gotten to where it's amenable to actually moving all this gear in and out and just kind of taking in the breeze on their patio. Is there a button you're looking for there, Kevin?
Nope.
Or are you doing a magic trick?
I'm just waving my hands. Exactly. It's like simsalabim.
I have to learn how to
digitate.
I have to learn to do all that stuff for my role as Drosselmeyer in the Nutcracker.
Did you play Uncle Drosselmeyer?
I will this year.
Really?
I did. Yeah.
Are you gonna play him creepy? Because that's a creepy character.
No, I'm not. I'm gonna leave that to the other production company. I just
Mighty fascinated with that young girl.
Yeah, and well,
I always thought the Nutcracker was a disturbing tale.
What is it is Tchaikovsky was a little bit off.
See,
but my wife volunteered me for this. I want to make this very clear.
We understand.
My wife volunteered me for this, although she is playing the wife of the host couple, at which the first act doesn't go with the second act. The first act is all about a party on Christmas Eve.
Yep.
You know, and then the second act has got Spanish dancers and magical.
Well, it's all fantasy from that point on.
Yeah, but they don't match.
Like I said, it's all fantasy from that point.
Well, most fantasy matches. I mean, if
In
he
what
uses,
way do you mean match?
if he uses a chainsaw in the first scene to kill people, he uses the chainsaw all the way until they get him in the last scene.
All right, I got you.
Not that I want any more stage time, because I certainly don't.
Hey, today's program brought to you by our friends at Salassi Jewelry and Fine Gifts. Our good friends, Stuart Salassi, his wife Renee Salassi, and their fine staff. And let me tell you, they got some good stuff they want you to know about, too. So, first of all, if you're going out there, it's a beautiful store, spacious. It's kind of like I don't know, it's just very historic and spacious. Stuart Salassi is a certified GIA diamond graduate. That means he's an expert on diamonds. And he knows a phony baloney hype diamond from the real deal, and you can trust him to set you up with a diamond that's going to suit your budget and suit your loved one.
Well, and that's the whole thing. You know, you from advertising and commercials, you hear about, the VVS1 clear diamond and all that, and something that's about the size of a phonograph needle is going to cost you about $185,000. But what Stuart does, and he's very proud of this, and his customers are grateful, he will match you with a diamond that looks good to your eye and looks good on her finger to fit the budget you want. Because nobody is going to look at your fiance's finger with a 10-power loop.
They design, they build, they repair, they do appraisals of your jewelry. I'll bet you've got tons of jewelry sitting around the house and no insurance rider for if that jewelry should be stolen.
Yeah, and you know what? If you've got $35,000 worth of jewelry, you get burgled, and you look at your homeowner's policy, and the agent says,
goodbye.
Your limit's $10,000. Oops, go get a rider.
Yep.
And to get a proper rider, to have it evaluated properly, you need an appraisal, and Stuart will do that for you. We'll tell you more about him and an event we're going to do out at their store in just a little bit. You know what? Nobody screwed up in the news the last few days.
Well, then let's get right to our first
So we
guest.
can get right to our first guest. Bo Staples is the political director for the Louisiana Association of Business and Industry. They were kind of tossing you all's initials around a little bit when they were talking about Lane Grigsby and him being a kingmaker, and they also talked about the all-powerful LABI. And how is it looking politically for business in Louisiana as we come to the runoff? And get a little closer to that microphone, if you will.
Good morning, guys. We did fairly well, not to toot our own horn.
Oh, no, we're going to have to get you much closer than that. This mic likes people.
There you go.
All right.
Perfect.
So we did fairly well. We don't want to toot our own horn. There's a big team effort, not only all the people that we have at LABI, but a lot of friend groups and a lot of the other business organizations that play a role in elections. We've been planning for this for well over a year, recruiting candidates and training candidates and supporting them, trying to get good people elected to office. LABI specifically, we had about 75 individuals where we issued a single endorsement in a race. There are other races where we might have endorsed 2 or 3 people in some instances, but 75 races where we endorsed a single candidate and that candidate drew an opponent. And in those races, we went 51-8, and the rest of them went to runoffs. Before qualifying, mostly to incumbents, and so we issued about 115 endorsements between statewide elections and VESI elections and all the legislative elections. But it looks like we're going to have, for the first time in our history, a majority of the Senate will be made up of lobby-endorsed candidates, and possibly a majority of the House will be made up with lobby-endorsed candidates.
Now, just so people understand, the Louisiana Association of Business and Industry is a they pay dues, you do lobbying, you do analysis, you do training, but how does someone get to the point where they win an LABI endorsement?
Right, so yeah, we have about 2,200 members, I think is where we're at now. Year for this, one of its purposes was to go out and train candidates. It's called the Louisiana Free Enterprise Institute. We go out and recruit and cast a wide net and seek anyone from any party to come in, and we will train you and give you best practices in a campaign. We had over 200 people attend 4 regional PACs that each of them has their own board, and we kind of have territories across the state. We're very creative. Candidates. About 100 questions. It's pretty thorough. It's about 40 biographical questions and about 60 policy questions. And then we take those questionnaires, and our board looks at them and evaluates them, and if they think they've kind of passed that first hurdle of the questionnaire, we conduct a sit-down interview with them. And our members, our board members, they can range from 30 to 45 minutes, and they'll go through the candidate's background, who their consultant is, how much money they've raised. If there's any questions about their answers on the questionnaire, it gives them time to expand on those answers or clarify answers for our members. And if there's a comfort there with our interview committee, then we'll take a vote to endorse. Sometimes we endorse more than one candidate in the same race.
Now, I've got to clarify and ask this. It is obviously a lengthy process, but it is through the lens of what will be best for existing business, what will be best for new business development. Is that a fair statement?
Yes, candidates that support pro-growth, pro-economic development policies, pro-business policies.
So I'm guessing you see primarily Republicans.
Primarily, I do believe we endorsed a handful of Democrats and independents this year. But yes, our platform, or I say, we have something called a plan of work. Our plan of work are kind of our bumper rails of where we're going to play as far as legislation. Our plan of work overlaps to a great extent with the Republican Party platform. So we do tend to endorse more Republicans than any other party.
In a state that's in the shape that ours is in right now, I mean, can any other thing but serious, conservatism, get it out of the mess that it's in?
We've been here a while in this mess, and not just the budget mess, just kind of this meandering around the bottom 5 states and economic growth and jobs. And every now and then we'll spur out of it. And sometimes we lag behind in recessions, and we're late to the party in boom times. And some of that's we get insulated by the oil and gas industry a little bit, and we rise and float with that. But it will take an effort by this next legislature to try and bring us out of the style of government that we've had since the long era for the last 80, 90 years, to try and bring about a more conservative set of policies and pro-growth policies, and so we're not soaking industry.
We are getting two different opinions from the gubernatorial candidates. The incumbent, Governor Edwards, says our economy is just booming. The challenger, Eddie Rispone, says we are last in everything and sinking. Where's the truth here?
I think it was Tyler Bridges and maybe Mark Ballard did a joint article a couple months ago, 6 or 8 weeks ago, and it did a very fair job of laying that out. It said, yes, we're one of the only states to have lost jobs in the last 4 years. I think we had the most out-migration, or one of the top 2 or 3 out-migrations over the last year. So while we are, and I believe the governor's lines have more to do with unemployment rates, and so when you have tens of thousands of people leaving the state to find employment elsewhere, you're going to have less people seeking jobs, so you're going to see those unemployment numbers drop.
Well, yeah, and also the way our unemployment is administered, you can only get benefits for half a year, so it's constantly cycling people off.
Yeah, and I think, and part of that is, they cite GDP numbers, and yes, I hope that our state's GDP has grown over the last 4 years, considering the country's has been booming. What's happened is we're that gap between us and everyone else has gotten wider. Mm-hmm. Everybody's enjoying the Trump economy, the tax cut, kind of this economic boom that a lot of people attribute to the Tax Cut and Jobs Act, and we've kind of been left behind. The gap between us and everyone else has gotten wider.
Let's talk a little bit about good old Louisiana politics. Ever since the Carter foil recount, and now we know that Franklin Foyle, who will be here on this program in just a little while, is in the runoff. People have been talking about the influence of one Lane Grigsby, and I want to disclaim, I know Lane. I was on the consulting end of the Greater Baton Rouge Airport District when he was on the commission, and when they managed to build a brand new $300 million terminal complex. What I want to know is, politically, why are people so opposed to people who have actually been there, done that, built things, been successful, contributed hundreds of millions of dollars to the economy? Why are they so opposed to them giving advice? And that's a serious question. I see you grinning because inside I'm grinning too, like, you morons. But why are they so opposed to that? It seems to me to be being deliberately obstreperous.
Well, he's painted as somewhat of a nefarious character in some circles. Some people, like he's that guy back in the dark who's pulling the strings.
I've known Lane, and I'll tell you what, you can hear Lane coming from about 3 miles away. He ain't never been in the dark. I promise you that.
You know what I'm saying.
Yeah.
Right. For those who have met Lane, he is a very opinionated, very passionate person. He puts his money where his mouth is. I venture to say that he's probably has put more of his wealth into politics and bettering of his personal wealth into bettering Louisiana than just about anyone. There are people with more money that play in politics, but I think Lane, the sacrifice he's shown to try and move the ball forward for Louisiana is unmatched, to be honest with you. I don't know if it's the culture that we're in, where you're always trying to divide people for political purposes, and you've got to make someone the boogeyman. It seems like our current governor's running against Bobby Jindal and Lane Grigsby. Well, neither one of them is on the ballot. Eddie Rispone's on the ballot. He's a self-made man, has built a company out of nothing. Raised in North Baton Rouge, footsteps from the ExxonMobil refinery. I think he went to Redemptress. It's just a great story that anybody in Baton Rouge can aspire to. So I don't know if we're in that divisive time in politics, and you're trying to to cast the haves versus the have-nots. I mean, that's been around for centuries, if not millennium. That's how you see movements start.
We seem to come back to this point, though, and I'm not a smart enough guy to do the analysis. But what I see us having, and I have said this many, many times, and I am not slamming anybody in this, but what I'm saying is when we have the incumbent running on, I expanded Medicaid, and he's got these people that said, well, I had, cancer, and I had all legitimate things. What bothers me is that if I'm the chief executive of this state, having to expand Medicaid is a failure. It means I'm not creating jobs and opportunity, all right? And then we've got people saying, hey, look, I started when I was 18, and I built a business that does $500 million a year, and people are going, yeah, but you like Trump, so you're mean. Well, how have we gotten, is it because of political gerrymandering? Has it gotten because of the way we divide up the budget pie, that so much of it goes to entitlements, that the people who actually do things, build things, and pay the taxes
are
not heeded? No, that's not the bad guy. They are not heeded. And as a political analyst, certainly this has got to be something that's got you scratching your head.
Well, I think that's a challenge that not only faces our state, it faces our country. I don't know the exact statistics, but it's like the top 10% of Americans pay 90% of the income tax. And the disparity between the rich and the poor has widened. The gap has. And our system of free enterprise, it rewards people that are willing to take risks, willing to put their money and bet on themselves and bet on others. And so sometimes it takes that capital to be able to make the bet to begin with. But, I certainly recognize that there's a segment of society that is unemployable for one reason or another, whether it's a physical disability or a mental disability or, they did not take advantage of the public education system. I've grown up my entire life in Baton Rouge. I went to public school system, went on to LSU and graduated. I had two loving parents at home that were invested in my education and helped me with homework and things like that. And so those are some of the, that can't be said for every person. And those are some of the things that our society as a whole has to help rectify, move back to a two-parent home. And LABI has, we don't get into social issues. But
well, and because that's a minefield and you're a business. And too many businesses, by the way, get into social issues, which is a whole nother program. But what I'm really digging for here is, do we ever get, as we're digging this hole of entitlement and unemployment and people being able to run successfully for office when their whole campaign is, I'll give you stuff. When do we get to the bedrock where the shovel bends and we can't do it anymore? I've gotten to have a real bad attitude. You know what? I don't mind feeding people that are hungry, or I never used to mind feeding people that were hungry. But I don't like when I got to tear up my car over crappy roads that my taxpayers aren't fixing to go and earn the money to do that, and then they give me the finger in public. I'm kind of tired of it.
Yeah, and I'll butcher Tocqueville and say, as soon as the masses are able to vote themselves funds out of the public treasury, that's the end of democracy and free enterprise. And certainly there's a tipping point at some point, and we can't give everyone free college and free health care and free this and that and the other. It's just unsustainable.
Well, you know what? I am a great believer in earned privilege. That's one of the things I liked about the original TOPS, where you had to have good grades, and then you get your seat. And then it got whittled down and dumbed down to where basically it's kind of the bottom of average, and you get your seat.
It rewards mediocrity. Let's piss some parents off. It rewards mediocrity.
And that was done for purely political reasons. Purely political reasons.
And, I can't rattle off LABI's policy. I've been there for about 9 months. I'm here to handle elections and not policy. But I do think TOPS, the Taylor family began it as a needs-based scholarship system, and so maybe there needs to be a higher standard for some students, and maybe it's a graduated scale based on need. I don't have that answer. I'm
Well,
not the policy guru.
Is it
but,
middle class welfare in its current form?
I think it creates a system. It creates a little bit of competition between the campuses, to be honest with you, because anybody. I think. I haven't looked at the LSU standards recently, but I think if you qualify to attend LSU, you qualify for TOPS. So anybody from in-state that got the appropriate credits should.
Well, and you need to remember, there was a time, and it wasn't all that long ago, when anyone who had in their possession a diploma from any high school in the state of Louisiana was automatically admitted to LSU if they wanted to go there. There was no minimum ACT or SAT score, no GPA. When I transferred to LSU from a college in Chicago, a very nice lady, as I was walking through registration, stamped my file in bright red letters, proficient in English. And I said, "What?" And she looked at me and she said, "Oh, sweetheart, you don't understand how many people we get that can't speak English, and they live right here in Louisiana." So, things have changed with LSU as well.
Yeah. But I think it creates, whether you want to go to Southeastern or ULL or UNO, if the money is following the student, you're kind of creating a free market, a little bit of competition between the schools to recruit and offer the best curriculum that bring in those students. But it's tough because we have rising tuition costs, and TOPS has to cover the tuition costs, and at some point everything will need to get looked at, and hopefully with this new batch of legislators, possibly a new governor, hopefully we can find that balance without raising taxes.
Well, speaking of all that, fire up that tablet again, and let's talk about who LABI is endorsing within the sound of our voice in our Facebook Live camera here. So.
Yeah, so they're coming out of the primary. We have 29 legislative runoffs. 5 of them are in the Senate, and 24 of them are in the House. We had 25. A candidate from kind of the Monroe, northeast area of the state. He withdrew. I think his opponent got something like 49.6% of the vote, and he wasn't going to try and get every single last
That's
vote.
close.
Yeah, that's right. All right, so let's go through the ones we got here.
So we've got, for the November 16th runoff, we've got those 5 Senate elections. The first one is State Representative Joe Bowie versus State Representative John Bagneris. I think that's the 3rd Congressional District down in New Orleans. We have not endorsed a candidate in that race. The next one is Senate District 11, which is on the North Shore. It's Senator Jack Donahue's old seat. And that has Patrick McMath and State Representative Reed Falconer running for that race. And we have endorsed both of those candidates. Both Reed's record in the House, plus Patrick's background and his questionnaire and interview were good enough for us to issue a dual endorsement there.
Okay.
The next one, obviously, is a seat much talked about in Baton Rouge, Senate District 16, Dan Claytor's current seat, outgoing term limited state senator. And we've got Franklin Foyle and Beverly Thompson. LABI endorsed Steve Carter for the primary, issued a sole endorsement. He and Franklin's lifetime score with LABI over 12 years, we have a similar voting record for both of them. Steve's was a little bit better as far as our scorecard is concerned. Carried some pretty big bills for us in that term, so we went with Steve. He unfortunately fell 4 votes short. You'll probably hear some news coming out in the next day or two about what we're going to do in that race there.
I think I have a feeling.
Yeah. Yeah, like I said, they were very close. Our interview committee liked both of them a lot.
All right, state representatives here in the Baton Rouge area. Because we're running a little short on time.
Yeah, state rep here. So we've got House District 68, which is the Steve Carter seat, and you've got Scott McKnight and Taryn Branson. The two of them came out of a 5-person field, I believe. Scott McKnight was the only candidate we endorsed in that race in the primary, so we will be with them again in the runoff.
All right, who else we got?
We've got Franklin Foyle's House seat, and you had 5 candidates there also. We backed Michael DiResto in the primary. Phenomenal on our issues. We also considered Barbara Freiberg, and you will hear some news coming out from us in the next day or two on that race as well. And the last one is Pat Smith's House seat, kind of the McKinley area, and that is Larry Selders and Dr. Leah Cullens. And we have not made a decision to get involved in that race yet. I think that's the 3 House races we have left.
You are endorsing Risponi for governor.
Yes, we endorsed both candidates in the primary, and we are have the privilege of backing at either.
I don't guess there's much point in things like what are the other statewide runoffs? Is it
Secretary of State
Secretary
is
of
the
State.
only one other than the governor's election.
Are you making an endorsement there?
We did. We endorsed every Republican statewide incumbent that was running for re-election.
All right.
And all of them across the finish line except Secretary Ardoin. We're pretty confident he'll be able to do that on November 16th.
Very, very good. In the minute and a half or so we've got left, the overall view in terms of potential gain at the polls during the runoff election in terms of business interest, give us a temperature on that.
As far as how much more business friendly these bodies will be?
Yes.
Yeah, I think you are looking at the first time where we will have a majority of business endorsed candidates in both bodies. I don't think we've ever held more than about, we have not endorsed more than about 40% of either body in the past. So we are very optimistic that we will be able to move the ball forward. I think one of the big issues you'll see is, regardless of who is elected governor, I think workforce development is where is one of the issues that our state's going to turn to the next term. And you've got a lot of business-minded individuals that have operated companies and have had to deal with hiring and training and trying to develop their workforces. And you're going to have a lot of great legislators with a lot of experience in that.
I have one viewer question. Johnny is watching us, and he's curious. Do you have an endorsement in District 71, which is in Livingston?
That is Buddy Mincy and Lori Kelly. We backed Jonathan Davis in the primary. He was, I think he came up about 15 votes shy of missing this runoff. We have not made a decision to get involved in this runoff yet, but our PAC boards are still concerned and can always roll something out.
Well, it has been a pleasure to have you with us. I think you gave us some sense of what LABI does, particularly around election season, and we were glad to have you with us.
Thank you all for having me, guys.
And
Thanks
again,
for being our guest.
I'm sure that people can review all this at your website.
Yes, we've. If you want to check out our endorsed candidates, we have northpacla.org and eastpacla.org and so forth, and you can go and check out. Each one of those websites has a list of every endorsed candidate that we've put forth this election cycle.
Bo Staples is the political director for the Louisiana Association of Business and Industry. Thank you, man. Appreciate you being with us.
Thank you. Y'all have a great one.
Before we move on to Franklin Foyle, who will be coming up in just a moment, I want to take a second to tell you about our new sponsor, Salassi Jewelers and Stuart Salassi. What I saw when I went in the first time is a really metropolitan-type jewelry store on Range Avenue in Denham Springs.
Yep.
They had just the right balance between fine jewelry and things like crystal and china. They had Mignon Faget, a big selection.
Oh, the ladies love the Mignon Faget.
And if you want to talk as we get into the holiday season, a great place to go and browse for gifts. And guys, if you need help, They have got some people that are really knowledgeable that will get right down to it with you and make sure you don't make a mistake. But now, here's something I want you all to be aware of. We are going to do a special welcome sponsor event for Salassi's Jewelry. We will do an afternoon podcast live from their store on Range Avenue, and we're doing that on November the 7th.
Which is 1 week from Thursday.
1 week from Thursday, so you have time to make your plans. We're going to do it in the afternoon, so you can come by like after work, or if you want to take a little late lunch, and just come by and say hello to us, meet the folks at Salassi, take a look around, and before it gets so darn crazy for the holidays, you can kind of pre-shop and see what's going to be happening in their store and in your life for Christmas. So don't forget, put that on your calendar. We'll be out there, and we hope to see you at Salassi Jewelry on Range Avenue in Denham Springs.
Little quick note here: they got a fall clearance sale going on now through Friday. Now these savings are good now through Friday. So if you get out to Salassi's 249 North Range in Denham, you can save a ton of money. So get on by. And you know, it's hokey. They, you know, radio commercials and TV commercials say, "Hey, mention that we sent you," but this is the way people find out if their advertising works. So if you do go by, mention Kevin and Bill, and they'll know their advertising works.
And if you really want to have some fun, go to some of the other stores on Range Avenue and mention us there too. It'll freak them out.
Oh, by the way, my favorite gem at Salassi's is Ruby.
Ruby the dog.
Ruby the beagle. She is the sweetest little thing. But get on by. They've got all kinds of. They got class rings, certified red box diamond merchants, and Stuart Salassi is a certified GIA diamond graduate. So
I love that store. There's just 1 second here to tell you this. There is a very, very well-to-do suburb of Chicago called Long Grove. And when I was a younger man and still lived there, used to get in the car, particularly around the holidays, and go to Long Grove because they had all of these. They had this great men's shop, and they had an art and antique shop, and they had a jewelry store that was just, you'd walk in, and you felt like you were on a movie set. And Salassi Jewelry's reminded me so much of that. Like I said, it's a metropolitan-style jewelry store right there on Range Avenue.
It's so big. It's like 3,000 square feet of showroom space.
And it's got the real good, you know. For example, if you're going to shop for clothes, let me ask somebody else because you don't. But
Thank you.
if a gentleman's going to shop for clothes and he goes into a men's store, you want to see a bunch of different lines. You don't want to just see one big table of sweaters and 5 suits and off you go. You want to see, you know, casual shirts and sports jackets and leather goods. That's the equivalent at Salassi. They got a little bit of everything. Anyway, I've run a little over time. We now welcome State Representative.
It's our time. We can do with it what we want.
True enough. State Representative, soon-to-be Senator Franklin Foyle. Glad to have you with us, Franklin. How are you?
Good morning, Bill. Doing well. Good morning, Kevin. Good seeing you guys.
Good seeing you.
By the way, before we get into your runoff race, I want to give you congratulations. I saw the lovely article in the paper about your reappointment ceremony in the U.S. Navy.
Thank you.
For those of you who don't know it, Franklin is a judge in the U.S. Navy, in the JAG Corps, and he handles criminal cases from the Navy and the Marine Corps. Weekends and a few weekdays, he goes. You go to Long Beach, or
I'll go to Washington D.C.
Washington,
I'm on
D.C.
the appeal court.
You're on the appeal court.
Got appointed to.
And you were reappointed.
I was.
Which is nice, and I guess that means that a star may be in your future.
Well, I don't know about that, but we'll see. I'm really excited to get the appointment. It's another 2 years on the Court of Appeals, which is the highest military appellate court for the Navy and Marine Corps. It's in Washington, D.C., and that will take me for the next 2 years, keep me busy. So I'm really excited about the opportunity.
Well, and congratulations to you as well.
Franklin, there was some drama coming out of the primary, and you and Steve Carter were tied. And you know, first I want to say Steve Carter is a good man.
Yes.
And
yes.
You know, and it was a difficult choice for me where to throw my vote. But I don't think I've ever seen 2 candidates get exactly the same number of votes. I was glad that the recount came up with a clear winner here. How did that all play out for you? Yeah, I'm sure you were.
It was an emotional roller coaster. Saturday night, my wife and I were watching the results at our house on the computer, and when the last precincts came in that were reported, I was actually up by 8 votes. So we went to bed thinking I had made the runoff by 8 votes. unfortunately, I got a call in the middle of the night from the Secretary of State, Kyle Ardoin. I thought he was calling to congratulate me. He actually said there was a mistake in the tabulation of the paper ballots. I said, what are you talking about? He said, well, we had to rerun them. When we reran them, you came up tied. It was the middle of the night. I was stunned and couldn't sleep, of course, the rest of the night, wondering what happened. You know, why did they rerun the ballots? Really didn't have any idea what was going on at that point. So Sunday, I wake up and I talk to Kyle Ardoin again, and he said, we're going to have a meeting in our office this afternoon with all the candidates to talk about where we are. And so at that point in time, it still had not been released to the public, but I knew that when they retabulated the votes, which they were going to put in the system, I was in a dead heat tie with Steve Carter, and we each had over 12,000 votes, which is amazing. So I had lost the eight vote lead. One of the options we have as candidates is you can have a manual recount of these paper ballots. These are ballots that people send from overseas, or if they're elderly and can't go to the polling place. And they basically color in a circle, and they're read by a Scantron machine the night of the election. They had never been hand counted in our case, and so we had the right to ask people to physically look and count them. And so that happened on the following Thursday, and luckily I came up 4 votes ahead. But I got to tell you, it was the longest week of my life, because every day I woke up thinking, what's going to happen with this? Could there be a tie? And it was quite a dilemma.
Well, it's the kind of thing that also, for whatever reason, makes people very, very, very leery of our system. That it's easy to tamper with things or to discount or whatever. And I understand that we need absentee voting, but you know, if somebody only puts an X in the circle instead of coloring it in, and the Scantron machine doesn't read it, that kind of defeats the whole purpose, doesn't it?
It does, and I was worried, you know, are they going to be looking at voter intent with these circles and so forth? And luckily, we didn't run into that situation with the recount. I had some very good friends who volunteered their time to go watch the recount for me. I did not want to be there while it was physically going on. I wanted to let them watch the process, and I think the process worked. And at the end of the day, I did come out 4 votes ahead. So it was quite a relief, but it was a very long week, to say the least.
Have you and Steve spoken at length since all of this? I know that for years in the House, you sat side by side.
Seatmates.
We did. He did call me after the recount to congratulate me and wish me the best of luck. And we have not talked since then, but we said, let's get together, you know, eventually. And I hope we do soon.
Will he do a public endorsement? Do you know?
That was going to be my question. Yeah.
Well, I don't know, but he has said or told me that he wished me the best of luck and that he was supporting me. So, you know, I hope that we will eventually be able to talk further about it, and I'm sure we will before the election. We served together for a long time, and a lot of our policies and votes are similar, so we have similar philosophies.
LABI said just a moment ago that your lifetime scores with them in terms of your, you know, pro-business legislation are almost identical. And you two have both been in state government for about the same amount of time.
We have. In fact, we both got elected in 2007 and came in together. And so I look forward to, you know, to get this runoff over with. I'm working very hard to be successful in the runoff, and I'm not letting up. I did lose a week of campaign time during the recount, but we are back at it, and I want to take the experience that I've gained in the House over the last 12 years and move over to the Senate.
What's the big difference in terms of legislation and policy and things you would like to accomplish between you and your opponent? And by the way, we have invited Beverly to be on this program. She has not been able to do that. I just want people to know we're not trying to stack the deck here.
And the invitation is still extended if she'd like to.
Or put a thumb on the scale
Sure.
in any way, but
I don't know so much as far as difference in policy, because I'm not really sure what her platform is on the issues. I do know that what I bring to the table is someone that's been in the House for 12 years. I've passed 73 bills into law. Of all the people that I came in with in 2007, that's the 3rd highest passage rate. I'm someone that will be effective over in the Senate and also use my experience. You know, when you hire someone for a job, you want someone with the most experience. And so that's what I'm offering as my resume. And every year that I've been in the legislature, I have specially focused on people with special needs, and I've brought a bill for the disability community every year. That's something that I'm going to continue to make a priority over in the Senate, and that's what I'm going to bring. I've also been on the Appropriations Committee for 8 years, so I know how the budgeting process works, and I'll tell you, I learn something new every year. Even after 12 years, I keep learning.
And while we're talking committees, do you have a committee wish list for the Senate?
I do. I mean, I would be open, of course, to any committee, but I would love to be on the Senate Finance Committee, which is I'm on the Appropriations Committee in the House, and that's the corresponding committee in the
counterpart,
Senate. I mean, it's really important, especially for Baton Rouge with LSU and Pennington. We have a lot of big government institutions here that rely on state funding, and it's nice if I can be on that committee to be part of the budget process.
Yeah, Joint Committee on Budget, like to be on that too?
I would, and if you're a member of
Finance?
or Appropriations, you're automatically a member of that committee. And I'm on that committee right now. And it's really important because, you know, like I said, not only do we have these big institutions here, but back to my fight for the disability community, there are a lot of things that they need as well.
What about judiciary?
That's something I would certainly consider as well, being an attorney. I've got the background for it. My first year in the House, I was on the Judiciary Committee and really enjoyed that. So I'm really open. In the House, I've been on natural resources, appropriations, and judiciary. Those are the three committees that I spent most of my time in. I'm also chairman of Homeland Security.
I've got a couple of natural resources. Well, one natural resource question from AJ, who's watching. He'd like to know where you stand on the public versus private tidal ebb and flow waterway access issue.
Yeah, that's a very difficult issue. I've tried to educate myself on that better. It came up for a vote 2 years ago, and I voted against the legislation. I guess it was in favor of the landowners, but I have reached out to the fishermen to talk to them about issues and what's the compromise. And you know, it's easy if you're talking about an area where there's land and you have a fence around it. What gets complicated is when there was land, and then because of coastal erosion, where someone had land, the water went away.
Yep.
I'm sorry, the land went away, and the
Yeah,
water
and the
covers
water
it.
is eased in, yeah.
Right.
So it's complicated, but a lot of we hear from a lot of sportsmen. Like Eric says, we need to take Bayou Manchac off the scenic rivers list. His comment says that would be less red tape for drainage improvements.
Yeah, and someone called me about that, and it might have been Eric actually recently. I passed the bill 10 years ago for Bayou Manchac to be a historic waterway. And really all that does is it gives wildlife and fisheries a say if you want to do work on Bayou Manchac. But I specifically wrote I pulled the bill recently because someone had asked me about it. I specifically wrote in the legislation that you can snag and dredge Bayou Manchac, that this bill does not prohibit. It's simply to have wildlife and fisheries oversee it so it preserves some of the historic nature of the waterway.
One of the things that you championed, unfortunately, to deaf ears a lot in your House seat over the last term was the need for a constitutional convention.
Absolutely.
And I'm not exactly sure on the mechanics because everybody's got a little different story, but is this something that you can start in the Senate that might have a little more momentum this time?
Absolutely. In fact, my first year in office, I brought a resolution to study and give recommendations on having a constitutional convention because I didn't think we should necessarily just jump into it right away without having a blueprint. And I continued to bring that legislation all the way through last year and have been successful in the House, but it's always failed in the Senate. And a lot of it was because you had people who'd been there a long time. They wanted the status quo. And the governors have always been against it as well, and the governor has had a lot of control in the Senate. So this time, my plan will be, I will be in the Senate, hopefully, and I will start the legislation over there, and I think I'll have a lot better opportunity if I can get it out of the Senate.
One of the things that we worry about, and I realize that the budget has to start in the House, and it has to come to the Senate for revision or consent or to get it to the approval process. I know there are a lot of joint committees. How do you feel a turnover in the Senate, which looks like it is going to end up being a lot more Republican than it has been for the past two terms, is going to look at what many people consider to be the disproportionate amount of budget money that is spent on entitlement programs?
I think you'll see a much more conservative Senate as far as the budget bills that come out of there. That's been the frustration. In the House side, we've passed responsible budgets where we have actually reduced spending. One plan that we've tried to push for the last several years is, hey, let's not spend 100% of the projected revenue. How about we budget 98% and hold some money back? And that's always gotten beaten down in the Senate. So I think in the Senate you'll see more fiscally responsible budget bills. That's not to say that we have people who have problems. We want to take care of those that really do need health care and medical care and so forth. But there's a balance. And, you know, speaking of the health care issues, the legislative auditor says he believes there's a lot of fraud
Yes.
in that program, and he does not have access to the financial records of those people, of the people who are using Medicaid. It's not allowed under state law. We've also tried to pass bills, and we've gotten them out of the House to give him that access.
I'm a little unclear on this, so help me, educate me here.
Sure.
We had Daryl Pepera on our radio show back 8 or
Springtime.
9 months ago,
Yeah.
yes. And he said, look, the national average is X. It appears that Louisiana is at Y, which is about double the national average of fraud. And he said, we can find people who shouldn't be getting it simply by looking at their tax returns. Right. And the Secretary of Revenue said that she cannot send those to us for inspection. And it was my understanding it's not a matter of law, but it was a matter of executive order, that to maintain the confidentiality of the taxpayer, which I think is kind of ridiculous because it's a public document
Right.
at the end of the day. But they said simply for excluding them from a program, they don't want that to happen. So is it a matter of law or is it a matter of order?
I believe it's a matter of law because we've passed bills to try to give the auditor access to those records. So that's my understanding, and we've passed that bill out of the House at least 2 years, and it's always gotten killed in the Senate. And I really don't understand why, because it's not like these records would be shared publicly. It would just allow the auditor to go in to see if someone qualifies because of their financial level. What you have sometimes are people who they lose their job, they get on Medicaid, and then they go back and they find a job later and they're above the financial limits, and no one's following up on that.
Yeah.
Now, let's play a little what if. If Governor Edwards is reelected, he's going to face probably a more independent legislature than ever before. Now, I'm reminded of 10 special sessions that he made you all come to in order to get his tax increases that he wanted.
Right.
How much more contentious is the relationship liable to be with a supermajority in the Senate and a solid majority in the House?
Well, the difference, the main difference will be if we have a supermajority, we can override vetoes of bills and enact legislation that way, even if the governor disapproves it. Under the current system we have right now, the Senate would pretty much go along with whatever Governor Edwards wanted at the end of the day, with Senator Alario leading the charge over there. And so this gives us more balance. Because the Senate would go along with Governor Edwards, I didn't feel like we in the legislature were equal partners or equal branches of power with the governor. So that'll make a big difference, and we'll have to, of course, work together, and I think we should, but it gives us a lot more leverage in the legislature if we can override a veto.
Will, in your opinion, will there be a change in climate in both houses where people say, look, in order to get things done expeditiously, we have got to make some compromises and actually work together to do that? Or will there be this entrenched digging in until, you know, the Speaker of the House or the President of the Senate starts, you know, basically arm twisting people?
I'm hopeful that there will be more cooperation. One thing we'll see we didn't have this last term is you'll have an independent leader in both the Senate and the House. The House, we did for the first time elect an independent Speaker of the House. It was not the governor's choice. It was the House majority of us in the Republican Party
He did a fine job.
He did. And we had some learning curves that we had to go through, having our own independence. You know, we asked for it and we got it. And, you know, my first 8 years, Governor Jindal came in and selected the leaders, and they did what he asked them to do. So I do hope with the independence from the President of the Senate and the Speaker of the House that we do have more cooperation and that we don't get like Washington, because if we do that, then we're not going to be doing the people's work, and we're not taking care of our people. If
Mr. Raspone's elected governor, will it be the opposite, though? Will the legislature just give him what he wants, let him pick his leaders?
I don't think so. Since he's a Republican, and if it's a majority Republican legislature, he'll have probably more input in that respect. But I still think that ultimately the legislators are going to select the candidate that they want at the end of the day. There might be several that both governors will say, hey, I would like these, and the governors will have some influence. I just don't think the governor's going to be able to handpick who the presiding officers will be.
Now, this may be unfair, but any guesses who those leaders might be?
Well, on the Senate side, there are 4 or 5 candidates who are strong candidates, I think. Rick Ward in this area.
Rick Ward, good guy.
Paige Cortez from Lafayette, Ronnie Johns from Lake Charles. I heard Bodie White might actually be interested. There's several people who are in the mix. Sharon Hewitt from Slidell is interested. So I think we're going to look at 5 or 6 candidates, and it'll get whittled down fairly quickly after the runoff elections.
And in the House?
In the House, I've heard Sherman Mack is a candidate who's a strong candidate. Stuart Bishop from Lafayette is running hard. There's some second-termers. Those 2 guys are in their 3rd term, which is the last term. There's some second-termers, Stephen Dwight, Tanner McGee. It would be unusual, I guess, to have someone who's not in their 3rd term, but John Alario did it, but he really wasn't a
How many
new
third
guy.
terms did John Alario have?
He did get elected president of the Senate in his 2nd term.
Frankly, I was a little shocked that he didn't want to, run for the lower chamber again, just to, keep his hand in the pie.
I actually think he's been animatronic for the last 2 terms. I mean, because he's been there since Huey Long, right?
He has.
Yeah.
Certainly, I think the early 70s or late 60s. I can't remember. I think the early 70s. But it's going to be a lot different because a lot of the folks in the Senate had been in the House before and had been there before term limits. So you had many of them who'd been there 30-plus years, and so you'll have a lot of new blood. Clearly, the House you'll have over half. I think will be new people.
Now, you were there. You were in that first class of the post-term limits.
Right.
And there was a bit of disorder that early in that first term.
There was.
Do you expect to see that again this time around?
I hope not. And, of course, being on the Senate side, I don't think as much so, because even though there'll be a lot of new senators, a lot of us had served in the House previously, and so that's valuable experience. But, yes, when I came in the first time, there were 60 new state representatives out of 105, and we had a lot of things to figure out. And once again, it really advantages to the governor, because the governor had a big staff, and we were brand new and still learning, and so it gives them an advantage.
One of the things that you talked about a great deal in the House was preserving TOPS by making it truly merit-based, by raising the bar for TOPS. And many times your colleagues were politically afraid to do that. And so the raises that you got in TOPS qualifications were negligible,
Right.
if at all. But this is an item that a lot of us look at because we certainly don't want to see it go away,
Right.
but we also don't want it to break the bank.
And that's been my concern. I'm a big supporter of TOPS for the best and brightest. Right now, the GPA requirement to qualify for TOPS is a 2.5, which is, in my opinion, that's an average grade. That's not the best and brightest. And TOPS costs us almost $400 million, and it's growing every year as tuition goes up, as more people go to college. So I actually pushed legislation to raise the GPA to a 3.0. I didn't even address the ACT requirements. I felt like, let's do small increments. Got pushed back, so I compromised and moved it back to a 2.75. I got it out of the House by 1 vote, and then it got killed in the Senate. And so it was very frustrating, and I think one thing that kept it highlighted was the year before, we didn't fully fund TOPS for the first time. It's the only time we've never fully funded TOPS. And so people actually wanted to fix, or at least were looking to fix the problem. But then we came back and fully funded it that year, and it sort of got off the table again, the reforms.
But I remember the year that the legislature didn't fully fund TOPS. The earth didn't crack open.
Right.
The sky didn't rain cats and dogs on us. I mean, we got by.
But what I worry about, and this is my opinion, is that we have got 2 elected bodies saying, hey, we support mediocrity. C+, we're all in.
Right.
That bothers me. That sends a message worldwide about what is going into and coming out of universities and colleges in this state. I find that to be a marketing and public relations disaster.
Yeah, it is a problem. And, once again, if we want to keep TOPS sustainable, we need to rein it in and leave it for our best and brightest, because my belief is that the program should be there to keep these kids from going out of state, because if they go to college in Louisiana, they're more likely to stay and live in Louisiana. So I think it's important. We had a TOPS task force after my bill failed that was put together to look at how can we improve TOPS. And one thing we found out is we have the most generous program in the country.
Oh, yeah.
The other program is, and help me out, is it still, do Go grants still exist?
They do, and Go grants.
Why don't we ever hear about them? That's the needs-based grant program.
It is, and it's there, and we fund Go grants every year. The problem I have with Go grants is you just give them to the universities and let them hand out how they think it's appropriate.
So they pick the winners.
They do, and I'm not saying there's not need for Go grants, but I think we need to not rein, but maybe do some reforms to that program as well.
Should it be more like TOPS?
Well, it could be. I mean, it's financial based. You want to make sure it's truly for people who have financial needs. I think TOPS should be merit based. I don't care what your parents' income is. I'm looking at the kid, how they do in school.
Well, I think you take a young scholar and you reward them for doing well, and that's part of baiting your hook for them to finish school here and stay here and make our state a better place.
Absolutely.
I benefited from one of the very early programs from this in Illinois. When I was in high school, you could check a box on your ACT and your SAT and have your scores forwarded to the state. But you had to have a 3 the ACT, and I think it was at least a 1280 on the SAT. But once you got that letter that said you've got this many dollars to go to any college or university in the state of Illinois for this semester, and if you maintain a 3.0, you get this next semester, well, you feel like you've accomplished something.
Well, sure.
And you don't feel mediocre. You feel like all that studying was worth something.
Yeah, sure. I mean, it puts the responsibility on the student to do very well in school, and actually it encourages them, because to qualify for TOPS, it's a 4-year process starting in 9th grade. You have certain classes you have to take. You can't take basket weaving and count that as part of your GPA. So I think it's important, and it motivates these kids at an early age. The other thing when we're talking about higher ed, which I've always been frustrated with, is the universities cannot raise their tuition to what the market dictates without a 2/3 vote of the legislature. We are the only state in the country, if you want to raise tuition by $20, you have to go and get a 2/3 vote of the legislature. I think you let the universities price themselves as the market dictates. That's how it was when I went to LSU in the 80s, and actually tuition was very low back then.
Do you not worry about the escalated cost of TOPS if the universities are given control of their own tuition?
I would, but a couple of years ago, we actually voted to decouple TOPS from tuition increases. So TOPS is now capped, and so if tuition increases, TOPS would not unless the legislature affirmatively raises
So
TOPS.
technically, it's not a full ride.
No longer a full ride.
Gotcha.
Well, and I feel the need to point this out, because there are a lot of people that whine and cry and moan, and to go to the flagship university in this state and pay in-state tuition is still about 25% of what it costs you to go to other flagship universities that we would like to think we can emulate, like the University of Michigan,
Sure.
or the University of Illinois, or even Alabama. You know, people who don't know the difference do a lot of whining. The top tuition you can pay in this state at a public university is still miles less than public universities.
Yeah, I was
in
going
other
to say my
states.
daughter just graduated from LSU and got a fine education, and it was about $10,000 a year without TOPS. Now, she qualified for TOPS, so my out-of-pocket for the tuition and fees was about $2,000. I mean, it was great.
Yeah,
University of
it's not
Michigan. University of Michigan in-state fees
Probably 25 or 30, right?
$32K a year. We know a couple whose son is going there, and he's trying to go all the way through medical school, and she said, "Yep, it's like buying a brand new BMW on August 1st of every year and then running it into a wall."
Hey, speaking of your children, I caught your son Andrew's radio program the other day. So he's gifted. I like him.
He is loving it. He works for a gospel radio station here. One of the things I was able to get started is a job training program at Baton Rouge Community College for kids who have some minor disabilities. And they do a year-long classroom training, and then they place them with employers in internships, and they have job coaches. And my son Andy loves music, and so he got a job at the gospel radio station, and every other, I think it's Friday of the month, he does his own gospel show.
I was just
Very
driving.
cool.
I was just driving along, and I was punching, the buttons up and searching for, and I heard, that young man's got a familiar voice. Then he identified himself. This is Franklin's son.
Let me tell you what, Andy
He's
knows.
awesome.
Andy knows more of the people who are on radio and on television in this city than you and I do.
Oh, he does.
He keeps up.
And he loves the oldies, the 50s and 60s, Frank Sinatra, Elvis. And so he got to the gospel radio station, and he's like, I don't know if I'm going to like gospel. Then he found out, well, Elvis sang a gospel song. Louis Armstrong sang some gospel. And so he's really enjoyed that.
Otis Redding,
Absolutely.
Sam Cooke.
Absolutely.
Oh, yeah. Some biggies. Franklin, what we always do with candidates is we give them like the last 2 minutes.
Sure.
2 minutes to do their kind of stump speech. So if you don't mind, we're going to turn it over to you and
My
let you just
pleasure.
tell everybody why they should vote for you.
First of all, thanks again for having me on your show. It's always a privilege to come on and talk with you
Glad
guys.
to do
But I've been in the state legislature now for 12 years. It's been a real honor and privilege to serve District 70 in the House. I've gained a lot of experience being on the House Appropriations Committee for 8 years about the budget. I've passed 73 bills into law, the third highest among my peers, so I will be an effective legislator as well. I work very well across party lines. I've worked with Bobby Jindal, and I've worked with Governor Edwards on legislation. I take the job very seriously, and that's what I want to bring to the Senate, more of my experience and more being an effective legislator for the people in District 16. I've got the support of Dan Clater, who's a senator there, as well as Paula Davis, who's a state rep here, and they've recognized my work, and I look forward to working with them moving forward.
Thank you. Franklin Foyle, he is in the runoff election for Senate District, and I always get the number wrong. So
16.
16. See, I was about to say 15. That's wrong. 16. As always, we appreciate your time, and we wish you a lot of luck.
Thank you, gentlemen. My pleasure.
And want to say thank you for tuning in today for the podcast. I want to remind you that we are brought to you by our good friends at Salassi Jewelry and Fine Gifts at 249 North Orange Avenue. Join us on Thursday afternoon, November the 7th, 2 p.m.
2 p.m.
2 p.m. We're going to take the podcast on the road.
And I think there's going to be vittles, as they say in Denham.
There'll be vittles, and there'll be refreshments, and there'll be great deals, and the wonderful staff at Salassi Jewelry and Fine Gifts. Remember, certified GIA Diamond graduate, that is Stuart Salassi, your proprietor, and his fine staff.
And drop by and see Lance and staff at La Divina Italian Cafe any day of the week for breakfast, lunch, or dinner. And Lance is going to join us for a little bit on our Friday podcast. If you're planning a Christmas party and you want it catered from La Divina, well, we're going to help you through that, get your order in and all that to make sure you're not locked out. Until the meantime, trick or treat, throw me some candy.
That's right. It'll be after Halloween next time we talk.
This is the first year that I have not laid in a stock of candy yet.
Oh, you better get it while it's getting good. Franklin, take care.
Well, I'm sure that, I'm pretty specific. I do Reese's Peanut Butter Cups and Milky Ways and Three Musketeers and Snickers bars and the mini M&Ms, and those never seem to go away.
Chocolate is a kid's best friend.
Well, and the leftovers are my best friend.
And I like to give it out hands full. It's like, here you go, kids. They go, whoa, most other houses just give us one. It's like, nah, man, take 6.
Yeah.
I don't want this stuff laying around the house afterward.
Yeah, because I'll eat it all.
Exactly.
I will eat every
Remember,
bit
kids,
of
the
it.
later you hit my house on Sharpsburg Avenue, the more candy you're going to get.
Take care.
God bless. Bye-bye.